What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel, guys. We here with American cities versus European cities. What's the difference? Hey, definitely finna check this out. This definitely gonna be interesting. Just seeing some European cities and stuff like that. There's a big difference. I like the color structure when it comes to the different European cities. It kind of almost like it relates it back to its history, heritage, and stuff like that, and of course, in American cities, I know what we finna see, and we have some big cities, and we finna see probably a lot of traffic type of stuff too. A lot of people, and how big they are. Cause I did say there were some American states that were there's some states in America that were they're probably twice the size as some of the countries in Europe, and that's another big difference. Maybe they got something for that, but y'all hit that subscribe button, send me more recommendations, and let's check this out. Let's check it out.
The United States and Europe both have large urban populations and deep cultural ties, but their respective cities have some distinct differences. For starters, there is a significant age gap between European and American cities. When Europeans first arrived in the Americas in the late 15th and early 16th centuries, there were as many as 10 million natives living in what is
Dang.
today the United States. But the natives were not concentrated in large urban settlements like the civilizations in what is today Mexico and Central and South America. If there had been, you can only speculate on what would have happened to them. There are some exceptions, though.
Hmm.
The oldest continuous settlements in the United States belong to natives and are located in the southwest United States. These
Oh
settlements were
wow.
founded around 1100 AD, but they generally have never hosted more than a few thousand people. The largest known native settlement in the United States hosted as many as 18,000 natives. This
Hmm.
city, called Cahokia, was located in what is today the
Cahokia.
state of Illinois, and just minutes from the modern day city of St. Louis. But Cahokia was abandoned by the year 1350. The 10 largest cities in the United States, on
Hmm.
average, were settled around the early to mid 18th century, while Europe's 10 largest cities are hundreds and sometimes thousands of years older.
Wow, that kind of almost resembled just a little bit. I actually been to the San Antonio, the Alamo. Uh, Man, that's probably something for me to see. Like, real, that's probably one of the oldest historian. I guess it was a historic figures that I've seen that still stands here. So I could only imagine because in Europe, I've seen so many other historic figures and places that still stand in Europe, especially with all the castles and churches and stuff like that. So that's a cool
In
thing.
the United States, on average, were settled around the early to mid 18th century, while Europe's 10 largest cities are hundreds and sometimes thousands of years older.
Hmm.
Europe's 10 largest cities by population
France.
are on average larger than American cities when counting the
Mm.
residents within city limits. Out of Europe's 10 largest cities by population, none have less than 2 million people. But in the United States, 6 of its top 10 have less than 2
Oh
million people.
snap! See, I thought
Europe's
U.S. was bigger. I guess I compared it to the state versus some of the countries and stuff, not the cities. Cause we got some big cities, but dang,
European
that's a
cities
lot.
also have a higher population density. Out of Europe's 10 most populated cities, only 3 have a density of less than 10,000 people per square mile:
Mm.
St.
Ooh.
Petersburg, Russia, Kiev, Ukraine, and Rome, Italy. The city with the highest density is Paris, with 53,000 people per square mile,
Wow.
nearly twice as many people as the United States' densest city, New
Dang.
York, with 28,000 people per square mile.
That's a big difference. And New York is that's a lot of people in New York. I feel like it's crowded, overpopulated in New York, but that's just me. But dang, that's different.
The United
That's
States'
a
densest
lot.
city, New York, with 28,000 people per square mile. After New York City, it drops off pretty quickly. The second most populated city in the US, Los Angeles, has 8,500 people per square
Wow.
mile. Chicago, 12,000 people per square mile. Houston, 3,500 people per square mile. And Phoenix, 3,100 people per square
Mm.
mile. The differences in European and US cities' populations and densities are largely due to American suburbs. People are
Mm.
living outside of city limits and in homes instead of multi storied
That's
structures.
true.
These suburbs initially came about because of the train. They then exploded with the wider use of the car and cheap fuel that powered them. land outside of American cities was also cheap, making homes affordable for the middle class.
Mm.
Chicago is often credited with inventing the suburb. After the fire of 1874, the city banned the construction of wood buildings. So speculators built cheap wooden homes as fast as they could just outside of Chicago for the 100,000 people that were just left homeless.
Wow.
After World War II, the federal government started guaranteeing loans that required 20% or less for a down payment and loan lengths as long as 30 years. Before this, it was common to have to make a 50% down payment with loan lengths as short as 5 to 10
Wow.
years. These new loans increased the amount of people that could purchase a home, but these loans had more favorable
Kind of
terms.
sound like how it is now to buy a home, just about. But I think it increased even more because now the down payment is. I mean, most people save and still try to put down like 20%, but now you just need 3.5%, depending on what you get approved for. Like buying a home, it depends on what you get approved for now, but really a certain loan you need 3 to 3.5% down to be able to close and get that house. So it's opened up even more.
Loans increased the amount of people that could purchase a home, but these loans had more favorable terms for new construction compared to existing housing since the government did not want to back a loan on a house that may have issues. This meant it was easier to get a new home in the suburbs than a property close to the city center, which was typically older. However, African Americans were often discriminated against when it came to these loans, so few were able to move to the suburbs. While mortgage discrimination has improved significantly, the discrimination that occurred from the 40s through the 60s contributed to generational poverty, and it has had a lasting impact on the geography of American cities. African Americans are still less likely to be living in the suburbs than whites, though the demographics are slowly changing. Today, more African Americans actually live in the suburbs at 39% than within city limits at 36%. The mass exodus in many of these cities, often referred to as white flight, led to severe urban decay. Residential buildings were abandoned, leading to local businesses shutting their doors due to less customers, which resulted in job losses, which led to poverty and crime, which led to more people leaving. This cycle continues in many cities today, while others have seen an urban revival in the last couple of decades, as many young professionals move back to the city. However, where wealthier people in the United States tend to live in the suburbs, in Europe, wealthier individuals are more likely to live in the city center. Take a look at this map of the London Underground, which shows the average income of the neighborhoods that use each stop.
Wow.
The highest incomes are at the center of the city, and the lowest incomes are at the farthest stops from the center. Speaking of public transportation,
That's very interesting. Cause that's a huge difference because I live in a small town and everybody. I mean, there you have some people live within a limit, but most of your wealthiest people, or what we would probably call middle class, like most people that like even like right now where I live in my neighborhood, it's probably considered outside the city limit just because it was nothing here. What, like 10, 15 years ago, it was nothing. It was just a bunch of land, and they're just building even more houses out here. And those houses that are within city limits, like they probably been here past 50 to 100 years. So this is interesting though. This is very interesting. And I'll get it too because y'all have better transportation system than what we have, especially here where I am for sure. But I think just in the states all around, so it makes sense to live within the limits, to use the transportation, and to get where you need to go.
Use each stop. The highest incomes are at the center of the city, and the lowest incomes are at the farthest stops from the center. Speaking of public transportation, Europe's public transportation systems are usually thought of as superior to the United States, with a few exceptions like New York City. Because of the suburbs, U.S. cities are too spread out, and buses and trains can't stop at every block to pick everyone up. If they did, it would run extremely slow. When it comes to roads, both the United States and Europe have extensive major road networks. But in the United States, large roads often run right through its cities instead of up to it.
Yeah.
While this may make sense in trying to quickly travel from state to state or city to city, It is often criticized for splitting neighborhoods and disrupting local
Like
communities.
Dallas.
Another thing that separates European and U.S. cities are the amount of skyscrapers. United States cities generally have more skyscrapers. Out of 50 cities in the world with the most skyscrapers, only 2 are in Europe. Moscow, Russia,
Oh.
with 57 skyscrapers, and Frankfurt, Germany, tied for 50th with 17. The
Okay.
United States has 11 cities in the top 50, with the most going to New York City with 287 skyscrapers. When European cities do have skyscrapers, they tend to have a section designated for them, away from their historic city center, like La Défense, a business district which is actually a
Wow.
few miles outside of Paris itself. The skyscraper was first born in the United States in the late 19th century, the first in Chicago and later in New York
Ooh.
City. The United States took pride in their large structures, seeing them as a symbol of their prosperity and power. Europe, on the other hand, already had established historic buildings and public spaces that left little room for large new structures. They were also resistant to what could be considered American. After the destruction of European cities in the Second World War, Europe had the chance to build whatever they wanted. They could redesign their cities around the car as American cities were starting to, and now had room to build skyscrapers. But Europe chose not to. Europe had an overwhelming desire to build their cities back to the way they were before the war and to
Which is
preserve their
good.
unique cultures and way of life.
Which is
The
good.
city of Brussels also
I
played
think that's a good thing because I've been to New York and man, you just about breaking your neck trying to look up to the skyscraper. Well, I guess that's kind of our unique thing, especially when you get to New York. You always see the skyscrapers and stuff. You see Manhattan in the movies, and it's just like, man, I wonder what it's like. When I got there, I was like, wow, this is my first time going. I was like, wow, man, it's just like the movies, but it was like, all right, that was it, you know.
preserve their unique cultures and way of life. The city of Brussels also played a role in the rest of Europe protecting its urban landscape. The city of Brussels had a laissez-faire approach to urban planning in the 1960s to the 1980s. Structures that were often generic and didn't fit in with Brussels' historic city landscape were put all over the city. The rest of Europe took notice and became concerned a similar randomness of structures could be placed all over their respective cities. Zoning laws that protected Europe's historic districts and structures were then passed across the continent. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe for other geography-related topics. Thank you for watching.
Okay, this geography channel, I feel the geography geek. I had to subscribe. I feel like this was a pretty interesting one. Definitely a huge difference, especially when it comes to the people, when it comes to the structures and different things like that. But the housing thing surprised me about, living within the city limits and stuff. Because I didn't think about that. I didn't think about that, how, especially where I live, most of the houses are really outside of the city limits. And that's where you see most of your, I would say, newer, better houses than, within city limits. It's more of the older structure. But they are building new houses around. I can say that because some of the old ones are falling apart and they building some new ones. But man, that make a lot of sense though for Europe to live within, like I said, because it have a great transportation system. Something that we definitely need to adopt. I feel like ours could be better everywhere in the States. So, but y'all let me know what you think in the comments below. That's all I have for this video. Y'all hit that subscribe button. Send me more recommendations. And y'all be blessed, be the best, and be you. I'm out.